Ryan wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stacked the last box in the hospital storage room. His third job of the day was finally done, and his body ached from lifting heavy supplies for 6 hours straight. At 24, he should have been out with friends or maybe on dates like other guys his age. Instead, here he was at 11 at night counting every dollar he earned because every single penny mattered. Walking to the parking lot, Ryan pulled out his phone and saw 3 missed calls from his mom. His stomach dropped. These late-night calls never brought good news. He called her back while sitting in his beat-up Honda that had over 200,000 miles on it. "Ryan, honey, I'm sorry to call so late." His mom's voice was shaking. "The bank called again today. They're giving us 2 more weeks and then—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Ryan knew what she meant. Their family farm, the place where he grew up, where his grandparents had lived, was about to be taken away. "How much do we need?" Ryan asked, even though he already knew the answer would crush him. $47,000, she whispered. "Your dad hasn't slept in 3 days. He keeps walking around the property like he's saying goodbye to it." Ryan closed his eyes and leaned his head against the steering wheel. 47,000 might as well have been 47 million. Between his 3 part-time jobs, working at the hospital, tutoring kids after school, and doing weekend shifts at a grocery store, he barely made enough to pay for his own tiny apartment and school expenses. "And Ryan," his mom continued, "we got another letter about Lily's surgery. The insurance company denied it again. They're saying it's not urgent enough, but the doctor told us if we wait much longer." His little sister Lily was only 16 and had been dealing with a heart condition since she was born. The surgery she needed cost $30,000, and every specialist they'd seen said the same thing. She needed it done soon, or her condition would get much worse. Ryan drove home that night feeling like the world was crushing down on him. 2 weeks until his family lost everything. A sister who needed surgery they couldn't afford. And him. Just 3 months away from finally graduating medical school, but now facing the real possibility of having to drop out. His apartment was basically a closet with a bed and a tiny kitchen. The rent was $600 a month, which was the cheapest he could find within driving distance of the university. The walls were so thin he could hear his neighbor's TV, and in winter, he had to wear 3 sweaters inside because the heating barely worked. Ryan sat at his small desk, surrounded by medical textbooks and unpaid bills. His student loan debt was already over $150,000. The letter from the school's financial office sat on top of the pile, another reminder that his final semester payment was due in 2 weeks. The same 2 weeks his family had to save their farm. He had applied for every scholarship, every grant, every form of financial aid that existed. His grades were excellent. He was in the top 5% of his class. But good grades didn't pay bills, and being smart didn't make money appear out of nowhere. Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from his study partner, Jake. "Hey man, my dad's company is looking for summer interns. Pays really well, like $25 an hour. Want me to ask him about it?" $25 an hour sounded amazing. But Ryan knew it wouldn't be enough, and it wouldn't start until after graduation. He needed money now, not in 3 months. He texted back, "Thanks, but I need something bigger." Like winning the lottery big. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Ryan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out some solution that didn't exist. He thought about taking a year off from school to work full-time, but that would mean delaying his dream of becoming a doctor. He thought about taking out more loans, but he was already drowning in debt. The next morning, Ryan dragged himself to his volunteer shift at the children's wing of St. Mary's Hospital. He had been volunteering there for 2 years, reading to sick kids and helping nurses with basic tasks. It was the one place that reminded him why he wanted to be a doctor in the first place. Even when everything else in his life was falling apart, seeing those brave little kids fighting their illnesses made him remember his purpose. Mrs. Helena Rodriguez was sitting in the family waiting area when Ryan arrived. She was 71 years old, always dressed nicely, and came to the hospital every Tuesday and Thursday to visit kids who didn't have family nearby. Ryan had seen her many times over the past few months, and they had started having short conversations about the book she brought for the children. "Good morning, Ryan," she said with a warm smile. "You look tired today. Everything all right?" Ryan was surprised she remembered his name. Most people didn't pay much attention to volunteers. "Just a long night, Mrs. Rodriguez. How are you doing?" "Oh, you can call me Helena," she said. And I'm doing well, though I notice you've been looking stressed lately. Medical school is tough, isn't it? Ryan was shocked that she knew he was in medical school. How did you know that? Helena laughed softly. I've been watching you with these children for months. The way you talk to them. The way you handle medical terms when you're reading their charts to find their rooms. Plus you have that look. The same look I used to see in young doctors when I worked in hospitals years ago. They walked together toward the children's ward, and Ryan found himself opening up to this kind stranger. Maybe it was because he was exhausted, or maybe because she had such a gentle way of listening. But before he knew it, he was telling her about his family's farm, his sister's surgery, and his fear of having to quit school so close to graduation. Helena listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When Ryan finished talking, they had reached the playroom where the children were waiting for story time. Life has a funny way of testing us right before our biggest breakthroughs, Helena said quietly. Sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Ryan thought she was just being kind, trying to make him feel better with hopeful words. He had no idea that this conversation with a sweet elderly volunteer would change his entire life in ways he could never imagine. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan found himself looking forward to his volunteer shifts at the hospital more than ever before. It wasn't just about the children anymore, though he still loved reading to them and seeing their faces light up when he walked into their rooms. It was also because of Helena Rodriguez, who had become an unexpected source of comfort during the worst time in his life. Helena was always there on Tuesdays and Thursdays, bringing new books and small gifts for the kids. But Ryan noticed she also seemed to time her visits to coincide with his shifts. They would walk the halls together, talking about everything from the books she brought to his medical studies. She had an incredible way of listening that made Ryan feel like his problems mattered to someone. Tell me about your family's farm, Helena said one Thursday afternoon as they sat in the hospital cafeteria during Ryan's break. She had bought him a sandwich, insisting that he looked too thin and needed to eat better. Ryan described the place where he grew up. The old farmhouse with its creaky wooden floors. The apple orchard his grandfather had planted 50 years ago. The barn where he used to hide and read books when he was supposed to be doing chores. He told her about his parents who had worked the land their entire lives and never asked for anything from anyone. It sounds like a beautiful place, Helena said softly. And it sounds like you have parents who raised you right. That's worth more than money, you know. I know, Ryan replied. But right now, money is the only thing that can save it. Helena nodded thoughtfully. You know, Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about our conversations. You remind me of someone I used to know very well. Someone who believed that helping others was the most important thing in life. Your husband? Ryan asked. Helena had mentioned being widowed, but she rarely talked about her late husband. Yes, she smiled sadly. David was the kindest man I ever met. He would have liked you very much. She paused for a moment, seeming to gather her thoughts. Can I ask you something personal? Sure, Ryan said, though he felt a little nervous about where this was going. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do with it? Ryan didn't have to think long about his answer. I'd save my family's farm, pay for my sister's surgery, and finish medical school. Then I'd probably open a clinic in a place where people can't afford to see doctors. There are so many people who need help but can't pay for it. Helena's eyes lit up when he said this. You wouldn't buy a fancy car or a big house? Maybe a car that actually starts every time, Ryan laughed. But honestly, I just want to help people. That's why I'm studying medicine. I grew up seeing my parents struggle when they got sick, because we couldn't afford good health care. I want to make sure other families don't have to go through that. That evening, Helena did something she had never done before. She invited Ryan to have coffee with her outside the hospital. They went to a small cafe near the medical school, and Helena seemed more serious than usual. Ryan, I need to tell you some things about myself, she began. I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am. Ryan's heart started beating faster. Was she about to tell him she was some kind of criminal? Or maybe she was sick and didn't want to worry him. First, my full name is Helena Rodriguez Whitfield. My late husband was David Whitfield, and he was a very successful businessman. When he died 2 years ago, he left me a considerable amount of money. More money than most people see in their entire lives. Ryan's sandwich suddenly felt like cardboard in his mouth. How much money are we talking about? Enough to buy 1,000 farms like your family's, Helena said quietly. Enough to pay for medical school for hundreds of students. Enough that I will never have to worry about money for the rest of my life. Ryan stared at her, trying to process this information. The kind elderly woman who volunteered at the hospital and bought him sandwiches was actually incredibly wealthy? It didn't make sense, but here's the problem, Helena continued. David's family never liked me. They thought I married him for his money, even though we were together for 35 years. When he died, they tried to contest his will. They failed, but now they're just waiting for me to die so they can fight over everything he left behind. That's terrible, Ryan said. But why are you telling me this? Helena took a deep breath. Because I have a proposal for you and I want you to know I'm completely serious about it. I've been watching you for months, Ryan. I've seen how you treat those children, how you talk about your family, how you handle your problems with dignity, even when everything is falling apart. You're exactly the kind of person David was, and exactly the kind of person who should inherit what he built. Ryan felt like the world was spinning around him. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying I want you to marry me, Helena said calmly, as if she was discussing the weather. Ryan almost choked on his coffee. What, Helena, This is crazy, is it? She asked. Think about it logically. I'm 71 years old, Ryan. I'm healthy now, but I won't live forever. I have no children, and David's greedy relatives are the last people who should get his money. But if I have a husband, everything becomes much simpler legally. You want me to marry you for money, Ryan said slowly. No, Helena replied firmly. I want you to marry me so you can do good things with money. There's a difference. This wouldn't be a real marriage in the traditional sense. We would be partners, friends helping each other. You would have your own space, your own life. I would never expect anything romantic from you. Ryan's head was spinning. Helena, this is insane. People don't just marry strangers for money. We're not strangers, she said gently. I've spent months getting to know your character. I know you're honest, kind, and genuinely want to help people. That's more than most married couples know about each other. But what would you get out of it? Ryan asked. Helena smiled sadly. Companionship in my final years. Someone who actually cares about me as a person, not just my bank account. And the peace of mind knowing that David's money will go to someone who will use it to help others, just like he would have wanted. Ryan sat in silence for several minutes, trying to wrap his mind around what Helena was suggesting. It seemed too good to be true, which usually meant it was. How much money are we actually talking about? He asked quietly. Enough to pay off all your debts, save your family's farm, pay for your sister's surgery, and still have millions left over to do whatever good work you want to do, Helena answered. Ryan thought about his parents, probably lying awake right now worrying about losing their home. He thought about his sister, whose condition was getting worse every day they delayed her surgery. He thought about all the patients he could help if he could finish medical school without drowning in debt. I need time to think about this, he said finally. Of course, Helena nodded. But Ryan, don't take too long. Sometimes life gives us chances that don't come around twice. Ryan spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about Helena's proposal before finally calling her. When he said yes, she was quiet for a long moment before simply saying, I'm glad. We'll do this right, Ryan. No regrets for either of us. The wedding happened just 5 days later at the city courthouse. Helena wore a simple blue dress and Ryan borrowed a suit from his roommate Jake, who thought Ryan had completely lost his mind. The ceremony lasted exactly 12 minutes. Helena's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, was there as a witness, along with Helena's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who looked at Ryan like she was trying to figure out if he was a con artist or just desperate. Well, that's done, Helena said afterwards, showing Ryan the marriage certificate. Now comes the interesting part. Ryan had never seen Helena's house before. When her driver pulled up to the iron gates of the Whitfield estate, Ryan's mouth dropped open. The mansion looked like something from a movie. 3 stories of white stone with tall windows and perfectly manicured gardens stretching as far as he could see. This is where you live? Ryan asked, still staring. Where we live now, Helena corrected gently, though I understand it might take some getting used to. The inside of the house was even more overwhelming than the outside. The entrance hall had a ceiling so high that Ryan had to crane his neck to see the top. Crystal chandeliers hung from above, and oil paintings in golden frames covered the walls. Everything looked expensive and untouchable. Mrs. Chen, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, gave Ryan a tour of the house. She had worked for the Whitfield family for over 20 years and clearly didn't trust this sudden new addition to the household. "This is the main living room," she said, leading Ryan through a space that was bigger than his entire apartment. "Mrs. Whitfield likes to read here in the afternoons. Please don't touch the antique vases." Ryan nodded, keeping his hands firmly in his pockets. Everything in the room looked like it belonged in a museum. "The kitchen is through here," Mrs. Chen continued, "but staff handles all the cooking. The library is upstairs. Mrs. Whitfield said you might want to use it for studying. And this?" She opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was easily 4 times the size of Ryan's old apartment. "Is your room." "My room?" Ryan asked, confused. Aren't married people supposed to?" Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Whitfield has her own suite on the 3rd floor. She thought you'd be more comfortable with your own space." She paused, then added more quietly, "She's a good woman, you know. I hope you're not here to take advantage of her kindness." "I'm not," Ryan said quickly. "I would never hurt Helena." "We'll see," Mrs. Chen replied, but her tone was a little less cold than before. The first night in the mansion was the strangest night of Ryan's life. His new bedroom had a king-size bed with more pillows than he knew what to do with, its own bathroom with a bathtub big enough to swim in, and windows that looked out over the garden. He lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a house that was too big and too quiet. Helena had explained that they would have dinner together each evening at 7 o'clock, but otherwise they would live their own lives. "Think of me as a roommate with excellent taste in real estate," she had joked. The next morning, Ryan came downstairs to find Helena reading the newspaper in a sunny breakfast room he hadn't seen during his tour. She was dressed in a cream-colored sweater and looked completely at ease in surroundings that still made Ryan feel like an intruder. "Good morning," she said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" "Eventually," Ryan admitted, sitting down across from her. Mrs. Chen appeared immediately with a plate of eggs, toast, and fresh fruit that looked like it had been arranged by an artist. "It takes time to adjust," Helena said. "David felt the same way when we first moved in here. He grew up on a farm in Kansas, so all this luxury made him uncomfortable too." Over the next few days, Ryan tried to find his place in this strange new world. Helena had given him a credit card with no limit and told him to buy whatever he needed. But Ryan couldn't bring himself to spend money on anything except the absolute necessities. When Helena asked why he hadn't bought new clothes, Ryan admitted he felt guilty spending money that wasn't really his. "It is yours now," Helena reminded him gently. That was the point of all this, remember? But Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The house staff, there was Mrs. Chen, a gardener named Tom, and a driver named Rodriguez, were all polite to him, but he could sense their watchful eyes. They were clearly protective of Helena and suspicious of his sudden appearance in their orderly world. Helena seemed to understand his discomfort. On the 4th day of their marriage, she suggested they spend the afternoon in the library together. The library was Ryan's favorite room in the house, 2 stories tall with walls covered in books from floor to ceiling, and comfortable chairs by the windows where he could study. "Tell me about your medical studies," Helena said, settling into the chair across from his. "What kind of doctor do you want to be?" Ryan found himself relaxing as he talked about his classes, his favorite professors, and his dream of working in family medicine. Helena listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed she knew more about medicine than most people. "Have you thought about specializing?" she asked. "Cardiology, surgery, neurology?" "Family medicine appeals to me because I want to know my patients as whole people, not just their diseases," Ryan explained. "I want to be the doctor kids trust and parents feel comfortable calling at 2 in the morning." Helena smiled. "That's exactly what David would have said. He always believed the best businesses were the ones that genuinely helped people." On the 5th day, Helena surprised Ryan by asking if he wanted to see some of the work she was doing. She led him to an office he hadn't known existed, filled with filing cabinets and a computer setup that looked more sophisticated than anything at the medical school. "I run a foundation," Helena explained, showing him folders full of documents. "We provide scholarships for students who want to go into healthcare but can't afford it. We also fund free clinics in rural areas where doctors are scarce." Ryan looked through the files, amazed at the scope of what Helena was doing. She was funding nursing school for single mothers, paying for medical equipment in small-town hospitals, and supporting research into diseases that primarily affected poor communities. "This is incredible," Ryan said. "You're helping so many people." "David started this work and I've continued it," Helena said. "But I'm getting older, and I need someone younger to take over eventually. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle and who won't forget where they came from." Ryan looked up from the files to find Helena watching him carefully. There was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. "Is this a test?" he asked. Helena laughed. "Everything is a test, Ryan. Life is a test. The question is whether we pass or fail." By the end of the first week, Ryan still felt like a stranger in the mansion, but he was beginning to understand that Helena was testing him in ways he hadn't expected. She wasn't just watching to see if he would steal the silver or throw wild parties. She was watching to see who he really was when he had the chance to be anything he wanted. On the 7th night of their marriage, Ryan lay in his enormous bed staring at the ceiling for the 3rd hour straight. No matter how tired he was, sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept racing with everything that had happened in the past week. Just 7 days ago, he was a broke student sleeping on a mattress on the floor, and now he was living in a mansion worth more money than he could even imagine. Around 2 in the morning, Ryan gave up on sleep entirely. He put on the silk robe Helena had insisted he needed and decided to explore more of the house. During the day, there were always people around. Mrs. Chen organizing something, Tom working in the gardens, or Helena herself reading in one of her favorite spots. But at night, the mansion felt like a different place entirely, quiet and full of shadows. Ryan wandered through hallways he hadn't seen before, past paintings of people he didn't recognize and furniture that looked like it belonged in a palace. He found himself drawn to a part of the house Helena had mentioned, but never really shown him, the wing where her late husband David used to work. The hallway was lined with photographs that Ryan stopped to examine by the light of his phone. Most were pictures of Helena and David at various events: charity dinners, hospital openings, award ceremonies. David had been a handsome man with kind eyes and a warm smile that reminded Ryan a little of his own father. But as Ryan looked closer at the photos, something seemed strange. In many of the pictures, Helena wasn't dressed like the wealthy wife of a businessman. She was wearing scrubs, white coats, and surgical caps. In one photo, she was standing next to David, but she was clearly in a hospital setting, holding what looked like a medical award. Ryan's heart started beating faster. Could Helena have worked in healthcare? She had never mentioned having any medical background, but she did seem to know an awful lot about his studies and the way she talked about the Foundation's work helping medical students. She spoke like someone who really understood what they were going through. Following the hallway deeper into the house, Ryan found a heavy wooden door that was slightly open. Light was spilling out from inside, and he could hear the soft sound of pages turning. Someone was awake. Ryan pushed the door open carefully and found himself looking into the most incredible office he had ever seen. The walls were covered floor to ceiling with medical books and journals. There were diplomas and certificates everywhere, along with photos of surgical procedures and medical conferences. And sitting in the middle of it all, surrounded by stacks of research papers and medical journals, was Helena. She was wearing reading glasses and a simple nightgown, completely absorbed in what looked like a thick medical textbook. When she heard the door creak, she looked up and smiled at Ryan as if it was perfectly normal to find her reading advanced neurosurgery texts at 2 in the morning. "I wondered when you'd find this room," she said calmly, closing the book and removing her glasses. "Couldn't sleep?" Ryan stood in the doorway, his mouth open, trying to process what he was seeing. "Helena, what is all this?" "This was David's office, but I've been using it lately," she said, gesturing for him to come in. "I've been doing some reading, catching up on advances in the field." "What field?" Ryan asked, though he was starting to suspect he already knew the answer. Helena stood up and walked over to one of the walls covered in diplomas. "Ryan, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned before. My full name isn't just Helena Rodriguez Whitfield. It's Dr. Helena Rodriguez Whitfield. I'm a retired neurosurgeon." Ryan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "You're a doctor?" "I was," Helena said. "For 38 years. I specialized in brain and spinal surgery, with a focus on pediatric cases. I retired 2 years ago when David got sick, so I could take care of him during his final months." Ryan walked around the office in a daze, looking at the awards and certificates on the walls. "Dr. Helena Rodriguez. Distinguished Service Award from the American Medical Association. Dr. Helena Rodriguez, pioneer in pediatric neurosurgery. Dr. Helena Rodriguez, Surgeon of the Year 2019. You're famous, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've read about you in my textbooks. The Rodriguez method for treating pediatric brain tumors, that's you? Helena nodded, looking a little embarrassed. Among other things, yes. But why didn't you tell me? Ryan asked. All this time I've been talking to you about my medical studies and you never said you were a doctor yourself? Helena sat back down in her chair and folded her hands in her lap. Because I wanted to see who you really were, Ryan. I wanted to know if you were genuinely interested in helping people, or if you were just someone who saw medicine as a way to make money and gain status. Ryan sank into the chair across from her, his head spinning. So this whole week you've been testing me? In a way, yes, Helena admitted. You see, Ryan, David and I never had children. We tried for years, but it wasn't meant to be. Instead, we poured our energy into our work. David with his business and me with my medical practice. But we always dreamed of having someone to pass our knowledge and values on to. And you chose me. Helena leaned forward, her expression serious. I've been volunteering at that hospital for 6 months, Ryan. I've watched dozens of medical students come and go. Some were brilliant but arrogant. Others were kind but lacked the dedication needed to really make a difference. But you were different. Ryan thought back to all their conversations at the hospital, seeing them now in a completely new light. You were evaluating me the whole time. At first, yes, Helena said. But somewhere along the way I stopped evaluating and started genuinely caring about you. You reminded me so much of myself when I was young, struggling to pay for school, working multiple jobs, but never losing sight of why I wanted to be a doctor. Ryan looked around the office again, noticing details he had missed before. There were photos of Helena in surgery, saving children's lives, awards for groundbreaking research that had helped thousands of patients, books and journals that represented decades of knowledge and experience. Helena, you could have been mentoring students at any medical school in the country. You could have had your pick of the brightest minds in medicine. Why me? Helena smiled, and for the first time since Ryan had known her, she looked her age, tired but proud. Because talent and intelligence aren't everything, Ryan. I've known plenty of brilliant doctors who lost their way, who forgot that medicine is about serving others, not serving themselves. But I've never met anyone who cared about people the way you do. Ryan felt tears welling up in his eyes. I don't understand. If you're this accomplished doctor, why did you need to marry me? You could have just given me the money or offered to mentor me directly. Because, Helena said softly, I'm dying, Ryan. The words hit Ryan like a physical blow. What? I have pancreatic cancer, Helena continued, her voice steady. It's advanced and the prognosis isn't good. 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. David's relatives know about my condition. That's why they're circling like vultures, waiting for me to die so they can fight over his money. Ryan stared at her, trying to process this new information. But you seem so healthy. You never mentioned being sick. I've been managing the symptoms with medication and I've chosen not to pursue aggressive treatment. At my age, with this type of cancer, the treatment would give me a few extra months, but at the cost of quality of life. I'd rather spend my remaining time doing something meaningful. And marrying me is meaningful? Helena reached across the desk and took his hand. Ryan, David built a fortune, but I built a legacy in medicine. I've saved thousands of lives, trained hundreds of doctors, and advanced the field of neurosurgery in ways that will help people for generations. But none of that matters if there's no one to carry it forward. Ryan felt the weight of what she was saying. You want me to continue your work. I want to teach you everything I know, Helena said. Not just about medicine, but about using wealth and knowledge responsibly. I want to share 38 years of experience with someone who will use it to help others, just like David and I always did. Ryan sat in silence for several minutes, overwhelmed by everything Helena had revealed. The woman he had married, thinking she was just a lonely widow, was actually one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the world, and she was dying. Why didn't you tell me about the cancer before I agreed to marry you? Ryan finally asked. Helena squeezed his hand gently. Because I needed to know you would choose to help me for the right reasons, not out of pity. And because I needed to know you were strong enough to handle the truth. Ryan looked into Helena's eyes and saw something he had missed before. Not just kindness, but the steel and determination that had made her one of the best surgeons in the world. This wasn't a helpless elderly woman who needed saving. This was a brilliant doctor who had chosen him for the most important job of his life. The morning after Helena's revelation, Ryan woke up feeling like he was living in a completely different world. Everything had changed overnight, but somehow everything also made perfect sense now. Helena wasn't just a wealthy widow who had married him out of loneliness. She was one of the most brilliant doctors of her generation, and she had chosen him to carry on a lifetime of work dedicated to helping others. When Ryan came downstairs for breakfast, Helena was already at the table reading medical journals instead of the newspaper. She looked up at him with a gentle smile that somehow seemed different now that he knew who she really was. "I hope you don't mind," she said, "but I took the liberty of calling your medical school this morning. I spoke with Dean Patterson and arranged for you to have a more flexible schedule for the next few months. I told him you were working on an independent study project with me." Ryan sat down across from her, still trying to wrap his head around everything. "You know Dean Patterson?" Helena laughed. "Ryan, I've been in medicine for almost 40 years. I know most of the important people in this field. Dean Patterson was actually one of my residents 15 years ago. He nearly fainted when I told him I was married to one of his top students." Over the next few weeks, Ryan's life transformed in ways he never could have imagined. Helena became his mentor, teacher, and partner in a way that went far beyond their unusual marriage arrangement. Every morning, they would spend 3 hours in David's office, which Helena had turned into a private medical classroom just for Ryan. Helena taught him things no textbook could capture. She showed him surgical techniques she had developed, shared case studies from her decades of practice, and explained the art of medicine that could only come from years of experience. But more than that, she taught him how to think like a doctor who truly cared about patients rather than just treating diseases. "Medicine isn't just about memorizing facts," Helena explained one morning as they reviewed brain scans together. "It's about seeing each patient as a whole person with a family, fears, and dreams. When I operated on children, I wasn't just removing tumors. I was trying to give kids the chance to grow up, to go to their high school graduation, to fall in love, to have families of their own." Ryan found himself absorbing not just Helena's medical knowledge but her wisdom about life. She had stories about every challenge he might face as a doctor: difficult patients, impossible surgeries, families who blamed doctors when medicine couldn't perform miracles, and the emotional toll of losing patients despite doing everything right. "The hardest part," Helena told him one day, "is learning that you can't save everyone. But that doesn't mean you stop trying. It means you make sure that every patient knows you cared enough to give them your absolute best effort." Meanwhile, Helena also introduced Ryan to the business side of their partnership. Together, they managed the foundation that Helena and David had built over the years. Ryan learned how to evaluate scholarship applications from students who reminded him of his younger self, kids from poor families who had the brains and heart to become great doctors but lacked the money to make it happen. This young woman applied from rural Montana, Helena said one afternoon, showing Ryan an application. "She's been working as a paramedic to support her family while studying for the MCAT. Her grades are excellent, but she can't afford medical school without help." Ryan read through the application and felt his heart break for the applicant. Her story was so similar to his own. "We should give her a full scholarship," he said immediately. "I was hoping you'd say that," Helena smiled. "You're learning to think with both your head and your heart, which is exactly what David and I always tried to do." They also worked together on expanding the foundation's reach. Helena had connections with hospitals and medical schools all over the country, and she used these relationships to help Ryan understand how medicine worked on a larger scale. They visited free clinics in poor neighborhoods, funded new equipment for rural hospitals, and supported research into diseases that primarily affected people who couldn't afford expensive treatments. But even as they worked together, Ryan could see Helena's health slowly declining. She was more tired than she used to be, and sometimes she would wince with pain when she thought he wasn't looking. The medication helped, but it couldn't stop the cancer from progressing. One evening, about 6 months after their marriage, Helena called Ryan into David's office for what she said was an important conversation. "I need to talk to you about the future," she began, her voice serious but calm. "My doctor says I probably have another few months, maybe until the end of the year if I'm lucky." Ryan felt his throat tighten. Over the past months, Helena had become more than just his mentor. She had become like family, the grandmother he had never had, the wise teacher he had always needed, and the friend who believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. "I don't want to talk about this," Ryan said quietly. "I know," Helena replied gently, "but we have to. I need to know that you're ready to carry on this work without me." Over the next hour, Helena walked Ryan through everything: the legal documents that would transfer control of the foundation to him, the investment accounts that would fund their charitable work for decades to come, and the network of contacts she had built throughout her career who would continue to support their mission. But more important than any of that, Helena said, "I need to know that you understand what this responsibility really means. It's not just about having money, Ryan. It's about using that money to make the world a little bit better than you found it." As Helena's condition worsened, their daily routine changed, but never stopped. Even when she was too weak to leave her bedroom, Helena continued teaching Ryan. They would video call with medical students around the country who were receiving foundation scholarships, review applications for new grants, and plan future projects that would help more people access healthcare. Ryan also made sure Helena's final months were filled with joy, not just work. He arranged for some of her former patients, children she had saved who were now grown up with families of their own, to visit and thank her for giving them their lives back. Helena cried with happiness when a young man brought his newborn daughter to meet the doctor who had removed a brain tumor when he was 8 years old. Helena passed away peacefully on a snowy December morning, with Ryan holding her hand and Mrs. Chen quietly crying in the corner. Her final words were, "Take care of them, Ryan. Take care of all the people who need help." The funeral was attended by hundreds of people: doctors, nurses, former patients, medical students who had received scholarships, and families whose lives had been touched by Helena's work. Ryan realized for the first time just how many lives his wife had affected during her remarkable career. In the months that followed, Ryan threw himself into continuing Helena's legacy. He finished medical school with honors and was accepted into a residency program at the Children's Hospital, where he and Helena had first met. But he also spent his free time expanding the foundation's work, funding new scholarships, and supporting young doctors who wanted to work in underserved communities. Ryan opened a free clinic in his hometown, ensuring that families like his would never have to choose between getting medical care and paying their bills. He funded his sister Lily's surgery, which was completely successful, and helped his parents keep their farm by paying off their debts. But perhaps most importantly, Ryan learned to carry forward Helena's approach to medicine, treating each patient not just as a medical case, but as a human being deserving of compassion, respect, and the very best care possible. Years later, when Ryan was an established doctor with his own practice, he would often think about that desperate night when he had met Helena at the hospital. What had seemed like the worst period of his life had actually been the beginning of something beautiful, a partnership that had taught him not just how to be a better doctor, but how to be a better person.